So today marks the end of the Way series. You've all journeyed with us on this series of, I think when I just checked, it was 20 different sermons, so 20 weeks of the Way. I think that's got to be up there as one of the longer series. I hope it's been really valuable for each of you. If you want to check back, they are all, except for the last couple, they are all on the podcast. So if you go on the website, you'll be able to find all of the media for that, and you can look back at different sermons on that. And I just really encourage you to do that. I wonder if for any of you right now, you can bring to mind any particular sermon message from the Way series that stood out to you, any themes within that you have felt challenged with, and if you do put that in the comments, do let us know. It would encourage others to hear that as well. So next week Jamie's going to be kicking us off with our new series, which is Act Now. Really exciting. So that is where we're going to be beginning to work our way through the book of Acts. Acts is a big, really meaty book, but we're going to be journeying through that a little, and that is a really wonderful book that grounds us in the foundations of the early church, and that perhaps feels really relevant to us in this time as we rethink how we do church as well. But I won't say any more. I'm sure Jamie will be sharing lots of different things about that next week. But for this week, we do have a final message, and that is titled The Way of the Outsider. So as you might have heard from when Jess mentioned earlier and I mentioned last week, we were sharing in a book club together, where we were sharing in a book that I've once again somehow forgotten the name of. I don't know how I managed to do that, but I've just remembered it. I don't even need to look at Hannah, even though I can tell that she's looking at me. It's Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race by Rennie Edo-Lodge. A really brilliant book. Lots of reflection that we had on that, and with 8 of us from the church community. And within that, one of the themes we were reflecting on was on who might be coming back to our church after lockdown, the time which may be some way down the line where we can all return back to the church building. We wondered who would actually be there. Would there be some real surprises as to some people that we didn't know at all? Would we be ready for that? Some of the people that might have been checking out the podcasts, the videos, the live streams, and actually some people that we didn't recognise, some people who might actually be outside of our comfort zone perhaps, or outside of the norms of our church community. And we were just sharing that would be a really interesting experience, and how we could be better prepared for that in welcoming those people who had previously been outside of the church community. So I've just got a question for you that I'm throwing out to you, and that is a question of whether you, in this moment right now, if you can think of any person or people group that you would feel uncomfortable about coming to our church. That is not an easy question to ask yourself, is it? But is there any particular people group that you can bring to mind at the moment? Any people that you feel, if they came to our church when we returned back from lockdown, I would feel a bit uncomfortable with that. I would struggle with that a bit. If you're going to be completely honest with yourself, are there some people that you would perhaps struggle with, and why? And perhaps hold that thought in your mind as we continue with this message for today. But we are going to be mainly focused around one passage, and that is Luke 17 verses 11 to 19, and it is the story of Jesus healing 10 men with leprosy. So we are going to read that together now. Now on his way to Jerusalem, Jesus travelled along the border between Samaria and Galilee. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go, show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. Wonderful technology. I'm just trying to bring up the second. There we go. And then one of the 10 lepers, when they saw he was healed, when he saw that he was healed, came back, praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go. Your faith has made you well." So the summary of that story is 10 men with leprosy are healed, but then just the one returns and gives thanks. And in many ways, this perhaps seems like quite a basic story or a basic lesson that can be drawn from it, a lesson that you would maybe teach a 2-year-old of don't forget to say thank you. You need to remember to say your please and your thank yous. But actually, and that's important, of course, for us to be thanking God. Giving thanks for the gifts that we receive is always a good thing. In Psalm 106, it says, "Oh, give thanks to the Lord, for God is good. God's mercies endure forever." However, when we consider Luke's wider narrative, there's much more to be heard from this passage than simply a morality tale aiming to improve the social graces of Jesus's followers. Jesus's encounter with the lepers takes place in the region between Samaria and Galilee. This kind of suggests quite a hostile border where it's neither inside nor outside the Jewish territory. The relationship between Samaritans and Jews at the time of Jesus was really quite conflicted and sometimes violent as well. Many of us will know of the story of the Good Samaritan. Also in Luke, Luke talks about the Samaritans more than anyone else. I think he may be the only one who talks about Samaritans in the book of Luke and in Acts as well, that he also wrote. He talks about Samaritans and Samaria, the place, the region that they live in. And the Good Samaritan story, where there is a person who is beaten and robbed, and a priest and a Levite pass the other side of the road and avoid him, and it is just one man, a Samaritan, who actually saves him and takes him somewhere and pays for him to be cared for as well. Another really inspiring story about loving your enemy, and that was a real challenge to the Jews of that time, once again, with that friction between the Jews and the Samaritans, saying actually it was the Samaritan who saved this man. Love your enemies. And centuries before this, they had been one people, the Jews and Samaritans. But changes and tensions that kind of built up through exile and through returning from exile put them at odds with each other regarding beliefs about scriptures, worship, and what it means to be holy. So this kind of history of hostility is the context at which we read this story as well, about the 10 lepers who are made whole, who are cleansed. And to the Jews, the Samaritans were very much outsiders. So in any case, despite this potential danger that could arise through this friction between the Jews and the Samaritans, without asking anything about their loyalties or their heritage or their intentions, Jesus gets about healing all 10 lepers, including the Samaritan. And if we are to jump back to near the beginning of Luke, at the beginning of Jesus's ministry, Jesus extends his mission beyond the boundaries of his homeland. He is sharing in the synagogue, and he reminds the assembly that there were also many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elisha, and none of them were cleansed except for Naaman the Syrian. And in response to this, the people listening seek to throw Jesus off a cliff. It can be difficult to accept the welcoming ways of God, can't it? Perhaps we don't do things quite so extreme, but we recognise in humankind we struggle to be welcoming, even though we have a God who is very clearly welcoming to all. And Jesus, in Luke 4, when he's sharing about this Old Testament episode, it's kind of like footage from a movie trailer where it kind of previews our story today about the 10 lepers, because it also, like the two stories together, they suggest that outsiders are recipients of God's work in Jesus, and that also there is something to be learned from them as well. And the stories of Naaman the Syrian in the Old Testament and the Samaritan share common details. Of course, there is... Siri has just started talking to me about the Old Testament. I'm just going to throw my phone to Han. We don't need Siri in this time. We've got God, so we're all right. So the stories of Naaman and the Syrian, they share common details. And of course, there's the fact that both of them refer to Samaria as well and concern healing from leprosy. Naaman, the Syrian, and the Samaritan, they are both foreigners, outsiders to the people of God. Naaman is even the commander of an army that opposes Israel, and even so, God heals each from leprosy, and despite their enemy or their outsider status, before they pledge any allegiance to God. Both the Samaritan and Naaman are healed from afar without being touched, and both return to the source of their healing, and both are sent along their way with a command to go. So it kind of demonstrates here that whatever God's criteria for showing mercy, they seem considerably more generous than our own norms then and now. With our passage this morning, Luke clearly plays on the earlier story of Jesus sharing about Naaman, and again focuses our attention on the outsider or foreigner status of the one who returned to praise Jesus. And Luke points out that he is a Samaritan, and then Jesus refers to him as a foreigner. And like the Good Samaritan of Jesus's parable, God's mercy is not limited by our human conventions regarding insiders and outsiders, even when the outsider's an enemy. So I wonder if we were to think back to that question of who are our outsiders, who are the people that we would perhaps feel uncomfortable with entering our church. Are they beyond Jesus' mercy? I hope we know the answer is no, they really are not. And we are called to show them God's loving mercy. And not only is the Samaritan shown Jesus' mercy, but actually the Samaritan has something valuable to say that Jesus then highlights in this story. It says that he threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him. And Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" So not only is this foreigner included, but actually he's also given a voice as well and credited for it. And to me, anyway, this highlights the distinction in church between being accepted and being embraced, between being included and being integrated, between being tolerated and being celebrated, between being welcomed and being affirmed. Being welcomed into the church community is where you communicate to someone, where you say, come and sit down, you're really welcome to be here today, and you can come and listen to what we have to say as a church, and you can take that in and then you can head off and you can come again next week as well, because we are welcoming to you. That's great. But actually being affirming, celebrating that person, integrating that person is where you are saying to that person, I value you for who you are. I recognise that you have something to say and I'm going to listen to you. BMS World Mission, who are this brilliant mission agency linked with the Baptist Union, they produce different magazines, and there was this really good challenging magazine, their Catalyst magazine, released a couple of months ago, and it's entitled Outsiders. And in the blurb at the beginning, the writer, the person who put the magazine together, says these words: when we say we want to welcome the stranger, the outsider, do we really understand what it's going to take? Do we really want to do it? Talking about people isn't going to cut it if we actually want to reach our neighbours outside the church. We have to be listening to them. If we want the church to grow and thrive and serve in a changing world, we need to listen to the voices we don't normally hear. If Jesus consistently had the patience and interest to listen to voices beyond the usual suspects, so should we. Only then will we truly be able to welcome them in and be blessed by their gifts. So jumping back to where I was sharing about the book club that we're a part of, and the one person who was asking if our church is prepared for new people who are different, new people who might be outside of our normal community. Are we prepared for that? Are we prepared not only to accept them, but to really hear them? I think that is a real challenge to us. And I'm sure all of us can relate to this in different ways, where actually we've had different experiences of someone who has been, we've had a problem, or we've had a situation, or we've had a group or a setup that we've been part of. Someone has come into that problem, or they have engaged with that, and someone coming from the outside in, and they've actually then pointed out something that you haven't actually seen within that situation. They've highlighted something. You've been kind of so immersed in that context that there's something perhaps quite obvious as well that they have pointed out to you, and they have really highlighted that. I remember when I started training in my church up north in Yorkshire, the minister that I was working with, he said, in the first month or two of your time up here, I really want you to just soak in the community. I want you to just listen. I want you to hear what people have to say. I want you to pick up on how this church does different things. And then I really want you to share with him in particular, to share different things that you can see within this community, things that you feel are strengths, things that you feel are weaknesses, because he really recognised that as an outsider coming in, I would come in with a different perspective than those who have been in that community for a long time. And that is hopefully going to be the joy and the treasure of new people entering into our community as well. It can sometimes feel quite a daunting thing, can't it, where we like to hold on to the community that we already have, the way things are, but actually when we invite new people who are outside of our community in, we need to be open to what they might have to say, to the things that they might actually identify within our community as well, and to really listen to them as they bring in a fresh pair of eyes, perhaps not soaked in the tradition that we are, or not seeing that the way things have to stay the same. So I think that is a real challenge to each of us, not to just welcome people into our community, but to really embrace them as well. Perhaps not physically in this time, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually, to embrace them and to listen to them. Finally, just a last couple of points that I'm wanting to share with you from this passage. The Samaritan does have something to say, and we need to look at what he has to say, this outsider to Jesus. So after the Samaritan saw that he was healed, the rest of his response, it's characterised by 4 verbs. There is turn back, there's all the Greek as well, but I'm not going to attempt to say some of these words. But there is turn back, there is praise, there is prostrate, to literally fall on his face, and then to thank. I will highlight the word thank in Greek. It's Eucharisto, which is also used in the Bible when it talks about the Lord's Supper as well, the Eucharist. So the Samaritan thanks in the way that Jesus calls us to give thanks for his body and his blood broken for us. And Jesus highlights the first 2 verbs by repeating them back to him as well. Was none of them found to return and to give praise to God except for this foreigner? So return and praise, they play really significant roles in Luke. At Jesus' birth, the shepherds returned and glorified and praised God for all that they had heard and seen. So those are all exactly the same Greek words as what we have in this passage. And after witnessing Jesus' ascension in the last 2 verses of Luke's Gospel, the disciples worshipped him and returned to Jerusalem with great joy and were continually in the temple blessing God. So this return and praise frame is kind of seen throughout this Gospel, and it frames the Gospel at the beginning and the end as well, kind of suggesting a roadmap for our response to God's activity in our world, to return and to praise. And finally, this passage ends with a command to the Samaritan to get up, to rise and go on your way. Your faith has made you well. When it appears in Luke Acts, the phrase get up and go or rise and go, it suggests a significant or even a wondrous change that is about to occur. After the Annunciation, for example, Mary gets up and goes to Elizabeth. The prodigal son decides to get up and go back to his father. And God tells Paul to get up and go to Damascus. The command get up and go, rise and go, comes with a promise to the Samaritan. Your faith has made you well. Your faith has literally saved you. The good news of this encounter carries with it a promise that through Jesus, God empowers people to step across boundaries, to share mercy with outsiders, to pay attention to things worthy of praise, and to move forward into God's future with assurance that there is more to God's story than meets the eye. And for that, may we always give thanks. So to draw this to a close, we have 4 points, and the first one of those is a reminder that Jesus welcomes the outsider. The Gospels are filled with stories of Jesus welcoming and embracing the outsider. Jesus eats with sinners. He mixes with tax collectors, with prostitutes, with widows, all of these people who are outside of the social norms, outside of the communities. And also, outsiders have something to say. Listen to it. Listen to them. Listen to what they have to say. This is a real challenge for us, as perhaps in the autumn term, winter term, we're not too sure when we begin returning back to the building. people that we might not have known before we went into lockdown who are new to our church community. We need to welcome them in. We need to do more than just welcome them in. We need to sit down with them and we need to listen to what they have to say. We need to hear from them and to learn from them. And the third point, Jesus is worthy of our praise. And that is a real reminder to us that there may be things in our lives that have happened throughout lockdown or even before as well, that we may have forgotten about, where we look back on them and we can really see that God was in those things that we can actually praise God for and give thanks to. It is not too late to give thanks to God for those things. So it is for us to return and to praise God, those two words again, to return and praise, to look on back on those things and give thanks to God. And finally, for us to rise and go, for us to step across boundaries, to embrace the outsider. Not for us just to wait for them to enter church, but actually to be church to them. As we draw this time to a close together, at this point, what I would ideally do is to play to you a song by Wren Collective, which is entitled No Outsiders. Very fitting, and it's called No Outsiders, and it says the words, "There are no outsiders to your love. We are all welcome, there's grace enough," and it has more really powerful words as well. So what I would really encourage you to do is not to just end today think that was a nice talk or that wasn't a very nice talk, I was quite bored actually, but to check out that song, to use that as a way of reflecting as well. The song's going to be put up on Facebook, on our Facebook page afterwards, so just click on the link through to YouTube or just type it in on YouTube, No Outsiders, Wren Collective, and just sit with that song. Allow the words to wash over you. It's a reminder that people who may be outsiders to us are not outsiders to God. Or it's a reminder that we might feel like outsiders right now. Some of us watching this might feel like an outsider even to this church community. But it's a reminder that you are not an outsider to God, and it's a challenge to us to be welcoming and embracing those outsiders into our community and learning and growing from them. I'm going to pray before we close this time. Lord, we thank you that in you, no one is an outsider. No one is beyond your mercy and your grace. Lord, may we be reminded that actually we are called to welcome and to embrace and to affirm those who may normally be outside of our church community. Lord, may we be challenged to listen to what those people might have to say, to be able to see you in those people, to be able to communicate your love to them as they communicate your love to us simultaneously. And Lord, just a final prayer of petition is to those who might be feeling anxious about returning to school in this coming term. Those who are teachers, those who are parents, those who are children. Lord, may they know your overwhelming peace, your protection, your love. May they make wise decisions and choices as they return back to school. And for each one of us, as we embark on this new term ahead, on this fresh new time for each one of us, Lord, may you speak to us, may you comfort us, may you encourage us in how we can be sharing your love with those around us, particularly those that we may generally feel less comfortable around. Lord, may we feel particularly challenged to speak to them and to show them what you have to say to them and your unending love and mercy for them. We ask all this in your name, Lord. Amen. Thank you.
When the enemy is says I'm done, I'll lift my praises. When my world comes crashing down, I'll lift my praises high. Till the darkness turns to dawn, I'll lift my praises. I choose to worship, I choose you now.